Let's talk about microphone preamplifiers. Today I want to do a mic pre shootout, unlike any mic pre shootout you've seen before. I'm going to compare three very different mic pre designs, from quite affordable to quite expensive, from what they call clean sounding to what they call highly colored sounding. We're going to record vocals, but here's the fun part. We're going to use them the normal way, but we're also going to drive them into distortion. We're going to hit them hard. We're going to make them sing so they show us their true character. If you thought mic pre's were boring, you might want to check this out. Have a listen. And as you know, if we do tests and shootouts on this channel, we always try to make them properly. So let me explain the setup. The differences between mic preamps can be very subtle. So I believe it's highly important to actually record the exact same performance if you want to compare those preamps, because the difference between one take and another might already be bigger than the difference between the preamps. So today we are using a mic splitter from ADT, Atelier der Tonkunst, very transparent sounding mic splitter. So we're going to record the same performance with three different mic preamps. And that way we can make sure we're actually comparing apples to apples. And like I told you, I want to test those preamps with different settings. So I want to go from clean to really, really dirty. I'm going to hit them really hard, believe me. I'm going to fully crank those preamps without distorting my converters. And I have invited a good friend of mine, René. He's the singer, guitarist, and producer of the band WIGHT. You really want to check out that band. They're great. There's a link below. Vintage rock band with jazz and disco and space rock influences. Check them out. They're great. You just heard him. And he spontaneously came up with a riff and a song, and we recorded that. And I made him record the song, made him perform a few times. And we were going from clean to more and more distorted. Lots of fun, right? The microphone we were using is a Austrian Audio OC818. This is the smaller brother. Actually, my favorite vocal mic at the moment. You can just throw it at anything. Actually, one of my desert island microphones, because it just sounds great as drum overheads, great on a guitar cab, great as a vocal mic. Highly recommended. Links to all the gear below as usual. So we were going from that microphone into the ADT mic splitter, another link below, into the three preamps. And now it's time to introduce our three contenders. The first one is this. It is the Audient ID24. And you might say, hey, why is he showing us like an affordable interface, USB interface or something? Well, there's something you might not know about this mic pre. The cool thing about Audient is that they have put their Class A mic pre, taken from their big analog consoles, which sound great by the way, into the entire ID range. So if you buy any of the ID interfaces, smaller or bigger one, you get exactly the same mic pre like you get in the bigger Audient consoles. And that mic pre sounds great. I've just worked on one of their biggest console in London a few months ago and made a great sounding drum recording. So this is a highly recommended mic pre, especially if you don't have the money to afford something super fancy. This really gets the job done and sounds great. It is known to be on the clean side. That's what people say. Audient preamps sound clean. But today I'm going to fully crank this thing into distortion. I don't think anybody has ever done that. I can already see some people at Audient getting nervous maybe. No, that's fun. Let's crank this thing. And the price for this one, depending on which interface you buy, can be below 100 euros per channel, which is pretty ridiculous for a mic pre like this. The next preamp I want to show you is also a preamp that I use a lot, that I have been using for years and that I really like. It comes from WARM Audio and is WARM Audio's take on the American classic mic pre design from the 70s, API. And this one is called WA412, a 4-channel preamp with around, I think in Germany it's around 300 euros per channel. So already 3 times the price of the Audient, and it's supposed to sound a lot more colored, you know, input, output transformers, discrete op amp. The input impedance is quite a bit lower compared to the Audient, so this is supposed to have a little more of a sound, especially if you hit it hard. What I like about WARM Audio, I gotta say that, is they make great products that sound great, that feel great. I mean, this has been here for years. We have several WARM Audio devices here in our studio. It's kind of affordable, but they use high quality components. And I'm actually using the WARM Audio WA412 more because I also have 8 channels of real API preamps, but I'm actually using the WARM Audio a lot more. It sounds super close, that's one thing. And the other thing is it has an output trim, which makes it a lot easier to drive that thing, especially for today's tests. I think the newer API 4-channel preamps also have that. I have the old ones, they can't do that, and I need an analog pad and stuff. So mostly I just go for the WARM Audio. I like it to distort my room mics, and I like that tone switch on guitar sometimes if you use dynamic mics. It's a cool preamp. But again, 300 euro per channel compared to 100 euro, already a little more money. Let's move on. So now we have a clean sounding Class A preamp, quite affordable. Then we have something that is a little more expensive and supposed to be a little more colored sounding. So now I was looking for something super dirty, for the most dirty preamp out there. I was actually looking for a preamp called the Gas Cooker, but they don't make it anymore. So I was like, what am I gonna get? And then at NAMM 23, WARM Audio released this thing called the WA MPX. And I was like, this is what I want, because it is based on the tube amp of an Ampex tape machine. It has 3 tubes, it has Cinemac transformers, it's intended to be driven hard, it's intended to go dirty. That's the whole point here, right? It has an inbuilt tape saturation, even inbuilt filters. So this design is supposed to go dirty, which means perfect. So we cover the entire range from clean to dirty. Right now, the price for one channel here is 600 to 700 euros. So once again, quite a lot more money, but then again, it also has a lot more features than the others. So time to get dirty. Let's start recording. So here we are in Cubase, and as I've told you, you see here, we've recorded several takes of the same song. And we're going from something like this to something like this. So from clean to very, very distorted. Let's start with the clean recording, and you can always see those 3 tracks. The first one is always the Audient, the second one is the WARM Audio WA412, and the third one is the WARM Audio tube preamp, the WA MPX. MPX that you can see right here. And I will be unmuting those tracks. You can see that here. And sometimes I will just solo them like this. And I'm not using any EQ on those tracks. You might want to add some EQ later to tame the highs, especially if you distort vocals. And I'm not using any reverb right now, which sounds a little weird. But, you know, we just want to compare the preamps, that's why. What I am using is a Waves RVox compressor on all of them. It just makes it easier to judge, because otherwise, especially the quieter moments will just disappear. Same settings on all 3 tracks. Let's go.
Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself, brother. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself, yeah. You shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
All right, I gotta say they all sound pretty close to each other in this setting. Let's just loop one of his lines here and have a listen.
Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself.
There is a difference, but it is very, very subtle. And you can actually hear it a little better if we go to this one over here. I want you to focus on the transients and on the high frequency details. Let's have a listen.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in.
And I've been switching between the Audient and the Warm Audio 2 preamp, and I feel like the Audient sounds a little more extended in the high end, and it feels like the Audient has faster transients, which makes things sound a little more open and a little more fast and in your face, which I guess is just more accurate. Whereas the Tube amp from Warm Audio seems to round off the transients a little bit slightly, which actually makes it sound really nice. Have another listen. Start with the Audient.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
I hope you can hear what I mean. So I feel like the Audient is actually the more natural representation of what's going on. But yeah, the Warm Audio just sounds, especially in this case, sounds a little nicer maybe, because we have a very aggressive vocal take and it tames things a little bit and makes it sound a little more round and warm. Nevertheless, this is really, really close. I also want to show you the WA412, which is actually closer to the Tube amp. Let's switch one more time between the 3.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
There is no difference in quality for me. It's just the Warm Audio preset and make things sound a little more, I don't know, how do you call this? A little warmer. It's Warm Audio, right? So now it depends on what you want. If you want something really accurate, I would actually go for the Audient. If you want something rounder, that's maybe the right word, you go for any of the Warm Audio preamps. All right, let's move on. The next thing I tried was pushing each of the 3 preamps like slightly into distortion. So they create some harmonics, you know, to find a sweet spot for each of them. Let's have a listen.
Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself, brother. Take a look at yourself. Take a look at yourself, yeah.
And one thing that was surprising was that you can actually distort all those 3 preamps in a pretty nice way. I wasn't expecting that. Let's just go to the same line like before and let's have a listen.
Doubted Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
First thing I notice is that both warm audio pre's now sound louder. By the way, I've level matched them, like the peaks are level matched, so there seems to be a little more compression going on in the two warm audio preamps. Let me just go back from the tube to the audient.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
Overall, I feel like the tube version sounds a little fuller, and once again the audience has a little more high frequency detail, but also sounds a little more harsh now. Let me show you one more really interesting thing which kind of shows you how the distortion sounds on each of the preamps. If we look at this here, look how shaved off the waveform is on both the audient and the warm audio 412. It really looks like hard clipping. It looks like clipping your converter or something. And the tube amp has a way smoother waveform here. And that is, no matter how hard you drive them, it's always the same thing. So the other two, the solid state preamps, always look clipped at some point, whereas the tube preamp always looks more like a distorted guitar waveform or something, which just shows me it goes into distortion more smoothly. And that brings us to take number 3, where we went a little further one more time. And I can tell you, it was much easier to dial in a usable amount of distortion and slowly dial that in on this one here compared to any of the other two preamps. Let me just explain one thing. In case you have asked yourself, how can I drive the audient preamp that hard? And the trick was this. The audient, because it's an interface, it's not a standalone preamp. So I was going with the mic, of course, into the mic pre, and then audient has a balanced insert. By the way, that is so cool. Thank you, audient, for adding a balanced insert. That is just such a professional feature for a small interface like this. So because at some point, if you push the preamp, you're going to clip the converters inside of this thing. So I used the insert to go into a line input of my interface, which takes up to, I think, more than 30 dB, plus 30 dB. So I could really crank it without clipping my converters. But then again, on both the audient and the warm audio 412, it was much more difficult to find a sweet spot because they both suddenly went from clean into distortion, whereas the tube amp has a very smooth transition from clean to distorted. I'm going to show you later. And you can hear that in the next take. Let's use our usual line and switch between the different preamps. So you can see there's not much change on the audient.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
And the 412.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
Whereas the tube amp, you can already see that.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me.
Has a way more audible but very smooth sounding distortion.
For my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for my Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
And once again, look at the waveform here. Even if the tube version sounds way more distorted, it looks a lot more natural than the other two. You can just tell that the other two are not intended for that kind of tone maybe. But let's go totally crazy. On the last take, I was fully cranking all 3 preamps. So that is maximum distortion coming from the preamp. Again, without clipping your converters. And you can see that right here. They all look like sausages now. Look at this. So let's see, audient.
Doubted me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Doubted me for...
Has anyone ever abused an audient preamp to do that? I'm not sure.
Doubted me for my mistakes.
But I'm quite excited because it still sounds cool. By the way, for a sound like this, you really need to tame the higher frequencies. So you need an EQ like this.
While sitting in your mantle cage, shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
So let's compare this with and without the EQ. Okay, where are we here? Audience.
Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes.
Yeah, the audience sounds a little more nasty in the upper mids compared to the 412.
While sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me.
It also rounds up the highs nicely.
For my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
Full tube distortion.
Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
There's way more distortion compared to the other ones. The other ones just can't distort that much. Let's compare again with the filter on.
Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
It gets closer, you see, so they can all be used for that kind of stuff. I just feel like the tube, the MPX from WARM Audio, has the most complex distortion. It just sounds a little more sophisticated and a little less nasty. Sometimes you can also hear that, especially in the low end, that sometimes, even the singer was complaining about that with the other two, the 412 and the Audion, you get those weird distortion in the low end, like.
Take a look at yourself.
That happens a lot less with the tube design. You can just tell it's designed to be abused like that. 3 great preamps, Audion being the most transparent. So if that's what you want, I mean, you should just get the Audion, that's fine. Or if you don't want an interface, you get one of Audion's multi-channel preamps. I think they have an 8-channel version of that one, and save the money. The 412 already has a little more mojo, has a smoother top end, has a big low end, sounds really nice, and takes the distortion a little better. And the tube thing, which I will show you in a minute, is a totally different beast and can do a lot more, is a real tone machine, so to say. And that's what we're gonna do now. The really cool thing about this preamp is that it has 3 switchable inputs. So it has a mic input, it has a line input, and it has an instrument input. That means you can not only plug in a mic and record like we did with this thing, you can also send your pre-recorded tracks through the balanced line in into the unit and distort them later. And you can even reamp something or plug in a guitar and use the distortion there. Really, really cool. That's what we're gonna do now. So and now I'm gonna take the clean Audion track. Let's go back to our line here. And I will send it through the WARM Audio through the line in. And I will show you all the nice features.
Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me.
Look how smoothly you can dial in the distortion.
Sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage.
And then you have different switches. First one is a tone, which lowers the impedance, which is the most subtle effect and is, I'm pretty sure it's more obvious if you have a dynamic or a ribbon mic.
Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for
I feel it thickens and warms up the tone a little bit.
your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes while sitting in.
A lot more interesting is this one, the tape saturation. Have a listen.
While sitting in your mantle cage. Shout at me for my mistakes. mistakes while sitting in.
It's not only adding a different kind of distortion than just cranking the gain, it also rounds off the highs. It's hard to hear right now because of all the added harmonics, but I will show you in a minute. Really cool.
In your mental cage, out in me for my mistakes.
And all those harmonics lead us to the next function here, which is the 2 kilohertz low pass filter, which is really cool. Have a listen.
Mental cage, out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes.
Dear people at Warm Audio, if you want to improve this, please add more frequencies to that filter, because that filter is really, really nice. It's just a little too extreme sometimes. So having something like 2K, 4K, and 6K would be so cool and would make this a lot more versatile. And if you add a lot of distortion, it always makes sense to turn on the high pass filter, because you don't really want all that low end going into the distortion.
Mental cage, out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes while sitting in your mental cage. Out in me for my mistakes.
And now have a listen. If I use more distortion, you can hear how the tape saturation adds even more distortion, but also rounds off the highs a little bit.
In your mental cage, out in me for my mistakes while sitting.
So you have more mid-range distortion, but less of the very high sizzle.
My mistakes while sitting in your mental cage, out in me.
So that means if you are afraid of distorting your vocals during the recording session, or if you want to use a cleaner sounding preamp because you don't know if you want to distort them in the first place or not, like we do now. We record something with the audience and then we distort it later. This is really, really powerful. And this is not only interesting for vocals, because on the playback that you've been hearing all the time, I've actually used this one on pretty much every track. So, for example, let's have a listen to the bass. The bass sounds like this. And originally, this is the most boring sounding bass ever. It's just the stock bass preset in Contact, in the Contact library. And it sounds like this. Programmed bass, obviously. And I send it through the MPX and it sounds like this. And I gotta say, in the mix, it really sounds cool. And now listen to this. We also have a Rhodes here from Waves, this one here. Or some kind of electric piano, this one here. And originally it sounds like this. But I turned it into this. So bass from 2 and piano. That's a real tone machine. That's a lot of fun if you want to go dirty. Okay, everybody, I hope this was interesting. Let me sum it up one more time. We've tested 3 preamps and I think they all have their, oh my God, in German we say Daseinsberechtigung, their reason to exist. Maybe, yeah. The reason to exist. All right. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Let me know which one you prefer. Which one is your favorite? Are you like more the clean or the dirty type of guy? Do you distort your preamps when you record? When do you do it? How do you do it? And what gear do you use? And yeah, do we have any audio lovers out there? Any warm audio lovers? Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know which one is your favorite. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also ring the bell. And if you want to hear more about all the stuff that I do about my own academy, Kohle Audio Cult, and about the products I release, there's also an email list below. I'm sure you want to subscribe there and sell your soul to the devil. All right, thanks for watching. It was a lot of fun to do this and to get dirty with you. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.